Welcome back to Frame 316 Media, where we explore how storytelling, strategy, and AI shape the future of content. So, in our channel, we look at how this shift looks like for brands, for agencies, for creative teams, trying to communicate with consistency and trust. For years, the biggest question about artificial intelligence is pretty simple. Will it actually work? Can AI reason? Can it create? Can it solve meaningful problems? But what if we're focused on the wrong questions? What if the right question is, what will happen if AI succeeds? What if it becomes so effective, so useful, and integrated in our daily lives? What happens when we start relying on it for judgment? That's a very different conversation, but that's a conversation that will happen, and it will go on in the next decade. One thing I notice about people using AI is they still argue about the limitations. They evaluate the technology based on its limitations. They're asking whether it's accurate. Does it hallucinate? Don't get me wrong, those questions matter, but they're questions about imperfect AI. But what if improved dramatically? And what if the recommendations become faster? That's where the conversations of users, the conversations of humans starts to change. Historically, technology helped humans perform tasks. What AI is doing differently is it helps us think through the task that is being performed. So the calculator doesn't tell you, when you use a calculator, it doesn't tell you what problem matters more, compared to the other problem. A search engine, it doesn't tell you what decision to make, right? But I don't know if you notice, AI is now prioritizing. It's increasingly prioritizing the choices that you make. It's prioritizing options, evaluating scenarios, and it generates recommendations, and that's really super useful where we are at right now. They save time, they increase efficiency, but every new technology, there's always a trade-off, and it's something that we also need to be aware of as the users of technology, as users of AI. Actually, the concern is not about AI being malicious. It's about AI being incredibly competent. The more we depend on AI, that's where the friction happens between groups, between creative teams, between corporate positions, the management, to the sub-management, to the execution level in a company. But over time, another good thing with AI is it can also influence, how decisions are made in these scenarios. As AI becomes more competent, programmers or the production team have more tools, to prove that the ideas or the workflows made their jobs easier and the production output was achieved, in a shorter span of time, just by using AI. I think the biggest challenge is preserving human capability while benefiting from the value of AI. In our line of work at Next Story Studios, we do a lot of AI workflows. We use ChatGPT, we use Claude, but we make sure we preserve, the fun part of the work that we do, which is filming, which is editing, which is, coloring the footages, whether we film the right footage, whether, a video is enjoyable to watch. These are things that AI doesn't have access to yet, but we combine different elements using AI to speed up the strategy and the thinking process so that we get to the fun part easier and faster compared to how we're doing it before AI. So obviously, content becomes easier to create, right? And the more easy it is to create content, the harder it is to trust, the content that we're seeing. But I keep saying, telling my friends, my colleagues, my coworkers that this ability to create content in this speed creates a demand for authentic content, because obviously you can detect if a caption, if a LinkedIn post, if a blog was written on AI, it just doesn't connect with you as a human. So the skill is, how do you master using AI but still coming up with output where the human effort is felt, the human effort is translated clearly. And I think this is a skill set that's very important moving forward. But yes, the success of AI can threaten human autonomy, but we have yet to see, in full view. Probably the engineers involved in building the AI that we're using, they know the capability of how it can threaten human autonomy in the future. But the thing about using AI is that as humans, we have control over our autonomy, because autonomy doesn't always translate to creation. Autonomy doesn't just always translate to deploying a code or programming a code without human intervention. I believe autonomy is always about that desire to create, the journey of having that desire to create, going to the place, the position where the output is created. So that's how I see where human autonomy is, and that's why I think the success of AI will threaten, but I don't think it will overcome, or I don't think it will defeat the purpose of human autonomy, because in the first place, part of how AI was built was the autonomy of human beings to think, and to create something useful for them. In a recent talk by Clarke in Oxford, he's the co-founder of Anthropic, he highlights something many people overlook. He said the biggest challenge may not emerge because AI fails. The biggest challenge would emerge because AI succeeds. Because once AI or once technology becomes really super successful, the question changes, right? It's about understanding what human beings should continue doing themselves, right? Part of that autonomy that I was talking about, it gives us that autonomy to choose what to build. And AI is in that holistic process that allows us to be more creative, allows us to be more productive. It's about designing a relationship where AI amplifies human capability while preserving human agency. And as production becomes more easier, our human judgment becomes more valuable, right? The future belongs to people who can control AI and not people who are controlled by AI. So right now in your journey as an AI user, probably as a developer, as a software engineer, as a designer, content creator, I don't think it's like it's already the time to panic. It's the time to be more excited about what you can do, because now it's easier to choose what we can build instead of figuring out how do I build this, right? So imagine that gigantic shift from how do I build this to what should I build, right? Because it gives you access to more things that you can build. And I hope that gives us this understanding as human beings that the human autonomy, the power to preserve human autonomy will always belong to us. Thanks for watching Frame Till 16 Media. Subscribe for more insights on AI-assisted content systems, strategic storytelling, and the future of brand communication.